The stories you'll hear here are bound by nothing but time itself. Welcome to Eternal Voices.
Grief is a complex and deeply personal emotion that touches all of us in different ways. We often associate grief with loss, the death of a loved one, the end of a relationship, or the loss of a dream. Yet, there is a type of grief that many people carry in silence, an invisible pain that doesn't always show on the outside but is very real on the inside. This is the silent scream of grief, a deep sorrow that lingers quietly, hidden beneath the surface, often leaving the person who feels it isolated and misunderstood. While society tends to expect grief to be loud, visible, and dramatic, marked by tears, sobs, or mourning, the truth is that grief comes in many forms. The silent scream is the kind of grief that isn't immediately noticeable to the outside world. It's not the kind of pain that demands attention, but it's the kind that never truly goes away. It's quiet, persistent, and sometimes suffocating, carried within a person who is still learning to navigate their world with the weight of a loss they haven't fully processed. Grief is a deeply personal experience, and everyone handles it differently. The silent scream occurs when this grief is kept in the shadows, often because the person carrying it doesn't have the words or the means to express it. This grief can begin when a significant loss happens, whether it's the death of someone dear, a relationship that fades, or the shattering of a dream. The loss may be real, but because it is silent and invisible, it often goes unnoticed by the outside world. For those living with this silent grief, the experience is a quiet struggle. It's a feeling of carrying something heavy inside, something that can't easily be shared or understood. It's not about constantly crying or showing the world how much you hurt. Instead, it's the emptiness that hangs over you, the way life feels slightly out of sync, the disconnect that comes from having an emotional weight that no one else sees. It can leave you feeling like you're constantly holding your breath, unsure of when the moment will come when you can finally exhale. Silent grief doesn't announce itself with grand gestures. It quietly shapes the way you approach life. It may make you withdraw from others, pulling away from social gatherings, relationships, or activities that once brought you joy. The emptiness and confusion that come with silent grief may feel like an insurmountable burden, one that you can't quite explain, even to yourself. You might feel like you're in a fog, unable to make sense of what's happening, yet too exhausted to find your way out. What's challenging about silent grief is that it's hard for others to see it. People around you might think you're doing fine, or that you should have moved on by now. But grief isn't something that can be measured by time. It's not linear, and it doesn't follow a predictable path. The pressure to look okay on the outside only makes the pain feel more isolating. This kind of grief can also manifest physically: chronic tiredness, tension, headaches, or trouble sleeping. Yet its emotional cause often remains undiagnosed. It can take a toll on your well-being, yet no one sees the reason behind it. And so, you continue to move through life, managing your day-to-day tasks, but carrying that silent scream within you. One of the reasons that grief often remains silent is because of the fear of burdening others. People who carry this grief may feel like they shouldn't speak up because their pain seems too much for others to handle. They may be afraid of being judged or misunderstood, thinking that no one will truly understand what they're going through. This fear can deepen the sense of loneliness and isolation, making it even harder to reach out for support. Additionally, some may feel as though they're supposed to have their grief under control by now. Society often suggests that there's a right way to grieve, one that looks like moving forward, finding peace, and being strong. This misconception can make silent grief feel like something shameful or wrong, as if there's an expectation to get over it, rather than fully experience and process the pain. But grief isn't a problem to solve. It's an emotion that requires time, space, and care. Healing from silent grief doesn't happen overnight, and there's no singular way to do it. The journey is different for each person, but one thing is universally true: acknowledging the grief and allowing yourself to feel it is the first step. The silent scream needs to be recognized, not ignored or minimized. It's important to validate your grief and give yourself permission to experience it without judgment or expectation. Finding a way to express that grief is a vital part of healing. For some, it may be through creative outlets like journaling, painting, or music. These forms of expression allow you to give voice to the emotions that feel too difficult to speak. For others, talking to someone, a friend, siblings, or a relative, can provide a safe space to process feelings. Sometimes, simply having someone listen can provide immense relief, even if they don't have the answers or solutions. It's also essential to practice self-compassion. There will be days when the grief feels overwhelming, and it's easy to feel like you're not doing enough to heal. But healing isn't a race. It's about being gentle with yourself and acknowledging that it's okay not to have all the answers. It's okay to not be okay all the time. Moreover, finding moments to reconnect with the world around you, even in small ways, can also help. This doesn't mean forcing yourself into activities or social interactions you're not ready for. It means slowly reintroducing yourself to the things that once brought you joy, whether that's a hobby, a favorite place, or a person who makes you feel safe. Healing comes when you find ways to nurture your spirit and allow yourself to heal at your own pace. Silent grief is not something that disappears overnight, but over time, it can shift. The key to managing it is accepting that it's part of being human. We all experience loss in different ways, and our responses to that loss vary. The silent scream, though invisible, is a legitimate and important part of our emotional landscape. Recognizing it, understanding it, and giving it the space it needs to exist without shame is a vital part of healing. Ultimately, the silent scream of grief can teach us a lot about ourselves. It shows us our resilience, our ability to survive in the face of pain, and our capacity for self-compassion. The pain may never fully go away, but as time passes, we can learn to live alongside it, finding new ways to move forward with the lessons it has taught us. The grief that once felt like an unspoken burden can eventually become a quieter, gentler presence, still present, but no longer overwhelming. So, if you find yourself carrying a silent scream of grief, know that you are not alone. It may not be loud, but your pain is real, and it deserves to be acknowledged. Take your time, honor your process, and know that healing, though not always linear, is always possible. You will find your way back to peace, even if it's one quiet step at a time. Grief is not a sign of weakness, nor a lack of faith. It is the price of love, and in time, love will heal what grief has torn.
The story doesn't end here. It's only waiting for the next chapter. Stay tuned for more from Eternal Voices.